I think when I started this podcast, right, um, I had an idea, which is like, I think the world needs to change the way they see entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurship shouldn't just be a victory lap. It needs to be more. And by more, I meant we need to break down the process. We need to study the journeys. We need to um, make more spaces, communities, and like realities where people can learn from the people that they admire,
Yeah.
but not on a surface level, where it's like, I want the depth of the conversation, because when someone goes into entrepreneurship with only the perspective of the victory lap and the wins, that first failure is going to paralyze them because there's a context missing.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of you as someone that thinks very deeply about why people should be building businesses.
Yeah.
Is that something you've always cared about?
I guess it came, I followed a certain path where, left university, got a job in an ad agency. And I suppose it's that, in a way, it's that, let's not call it the arrogance of youth, but the sort of naivety of youth, that actually you can maybe do this a little bit better than the people you're working for. And so you often, or people often ask, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And I just think it's just some of us get that itch that you have to scratch. And I think your fear of failure isn't quite as great when you're young. But I think particularly now, the kind of entrepreneurial narrative is so skewed, and it's so, dominated by the whole kind of chase to be a unicorn thing. And really, I mean, we'll get further into this, but that narrative of has almost become like a Hollywood myth. And the reality is, for most young people now, where the jobs just aren't there, entrepreneurship, or at least starting something, building something, the term entrepreneur can be intimidating for a lot of young people. And a lot of young people in the country right now, they have no other option to build a livelihood for themselves other than starting something for themselves. And this whole obsession with growth and scale just gets in the way of what needs to happen here, which is young people have to have the self-belief. They've got to have, there's so many of the young people who are part of this awful statistic of, 63% youth unemployment. They have, without knowing it, they've got a lot of the kind of competencies that an entrepreneur needs. Tolerance for uncertainty. They live very uncertain lives. Resilience, adaptability. So many young people grow up with that as a default setting. And that's what entrepreneurs don't have. Or, sorry, that's what a lot of entrepreneurs don't have and need to work on. So I think there's a whole bunch of young people out there who can take that entrepreneurial journey. But they just need to have the self-belief and give themselves permission that they can do it. I guess that's what we try and work toward. That let's not try and build, South Africa's maybe created 2 or 3 unicorns. That's not going to solve the problems. But hundreds of thousands of small businesses that employ 2 or 3 people is really what's going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I liked your analogy about unicorns versus zebras.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, look, zebra is a term that started emerging probably 5-6 years ago. And, we know about a unicorn, this mythological creature where a business has a capitalization of over $1 billion. A zebra, zebras have black and white stripes, and that sort of represents 2 opposites, which is, can you do well financially, but can you also do good in your community? And so zebra organizations are really community-based organizations that solve a problem or provide a critical service in their community, but manage to make a living. Yeah, they might not grow beyond that community, but they're there, they're profitable, but importantly, they do well and they do good at the same time. And they probably do well because they do good. And so I just think that's a far more interesting model for us in this country. Any entrepreneur who's starting something is solving some social problem. Yeah. Even if it's just by employing 1 or 2 young people to work alongside them, then they're solving probably our biggest social issue, which is the youth unemployment. And again, that narrative and that, I mean, obviously everybody wants to grow. It's built in as humans that you want to grow, you want to progress. But when the ecosystem is built all around how do we get to being a unicorn, that gets in the way of how do we build hundreds of thousands of zebra organizations.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same narrative. It's the Series A, Series B,
venture capital, build fast and break things.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because we talk a lot, particularly with the entrepreneurs we work with. It's like, go slowly and fix things. Don't go fast and break things. Because the journey is a long journey. It takes, it's a cliche, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And the journey isn't a straight line journey. And the whole concept of acceleration program, as we know, when you drive a car, if you accelerate when you're going around a corner, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneurial journey is nothing but bends. There are no straight lines. So you've got to go steady, and you've got to fix things as you go, not break things. We've got to get rid of this. And thankfully, Elon Musk is sort of painting himself into a corner now where nobody is really aspiring to be like him anymore. And I think the glitter of Silicon Valley is fading, and hopefully we can find our own models and our own role models to find a different way of doing it.
Yeah, you're an amazing role model for me and a mentor from a distance, for sure. And just talking about that journey, right?
Yeah.
You started building things in the 90s already. Yeah. And this happened, you were working in Ogilvy in the UK, came to South Africa, and started an ad agency of your own, with some partners. You spoke about the energy of youth, just like, oh no, man, we can do this. Do you remember what it was like to start like that, and what was it like back then?
Yeah, look, I think it was like a lot of people. You don't know what you don't know. You've like at that stage, I'd worked in an ad agency or in ad agencies and knew how they worked, but you didn't know what all the decisions were that you had to make. You knew the people you needed, you knew the technical skills because you'd done that, but the decisions about investing in more people, in managing overheads, in how you market yourselves, you just made it up as you went along. But I think one of the critical things is, choose your partners carefully as well. So it was, and again, it was before, I don't think we even called ourselves entrepreneurs. It was just another startup agency. It was like a creative hot shop. And we were the first of a whole generation of young guys who'd grown up in the big agencies, the Ogilvies and the Hunt Lascarises and the CBs, who then thought, no, maybe we can do it better ourselves, arrogantly. And then again, partnerships are difficult, and we realized that partnership wasn't working. So that was when I left and started then Instant Grass, which I know you know of.
I do. It's so crazy you speak about just how important it is to choose the right partners, right? And what would you chalk up to being a red flag in choosing partners? I do think that it's such an important step in trying to build something.
Yeah.
And when you're building something alongside someone else, at least you have energy to bounce from, right? And when you're doing it yourself, then it's just like you are the source and you need to just like try and build it out. Can you talk about partnership?
Yeah, look, it's difficult. In that situation, we'd all been working together. We got on well. We were all good mates. We, see each other out of work. But then you realize sometimes that closeness can get in the way of a business relationship. You've got to make hard decisions. And I think the most important thing is just an alignment in the early days of why are we doing this? What exactly why? Not how big do we want to get? How much, how do we want to grow? How many awards do we want to make? Why are we doing this? And an alignment of values. And I think the big issue is, is it the word we or is it the word I? And that's the challenge, because a lot of entrepreneurs are very single-minded and want to do things their way, and the whole sort of founder complex, the founder syndrome of struggling to collaborate with other people, that's true. And so when you've got a partnership of 2 people or 3 people, it can be really, really difficult. So I think, now I look at my current partner, and we're very different. We both have very different skills. We don't sort of socialize too much together. We're very, very close, but that closeness has come through the sort of furnace of starting this business, and we complement each other very well. So it's really just an alignment of the why, an alignment of the values.
Yeah. What kind of work were you guys doing?
The advertising work. Yeah, look, it was, we worked on all sorts of categories. We worked in the motor sector, we worked in the alcohol sector, we did work with Unilever, we worked with a lot of the banks. And we were trying to be, it was the sort of creative hotshot agency. At that stage, the Ogilvies and Hunts, they were the biggest agencies, and they were the best creatively. And I think we just wanted to go out and say, well, how can we as a young agency, can we compete at that level? And I think, rightly or wrongly, we were chasing the awards. And in our first year, we were winning Lurie's, we were winning Cannes Awards, we were the kind of new kids on the block. But then you start to wonder after a while, is that what we should be chasing? Because ultimately clients are paying us to build their businesses and their brands. They're not paying us to win awards. And yes, occasionally the two are complementary, but sadly not always. So again, it's about, what are you chasing? What's important? Why are we doing this?
What was the intention about starting Instant Grass?
Well, it's interesting. In the sort of last period of when I was still in the ad agency, we were pitching on the Levi's business, and one of the ideas was, well, Levi's is all around fashion, so we need to stay up to date in terms of what young people are thinking about fashion, about themselves, about what's cool, what's not cool. And we had this idea of recruiting these young kids all over the country as our sort of urban spies. And then we didn't get the business, and then a while later I decided to leave Bull Calvert Pace, as it was. And myself and Greg Potterton, who'd worked with me at the agency, we were playing pool one day, and we said, remember that idea we had about having cool young kids keeping us in touch with what, with what's in, what's out, what young people are thinking? Maybe there's a business in that. And it was literally one of those writing your business plan on the back of a beer mat.
Mm.
And that's what we did. And the name Instant Grass came from, so a grass is a British slang term for a snitch or a spy. To grass on someone is to snitch on them. And so we thought, well, if it's real-time snitching, then it's instant grass. So we called it Instant Grass. And yeah, it was really, and this was before social media. So, Facebook, I think MySpace was 2005. So this was 2003. So nobody had any quick way of finding out what was cool. So we started by recruiting young kids I say young kids, it was kind of primarily 18 to 24 in different subcultures, different sectors. Brahm was starting to bubble up. Melville was still probably the epicenter of cool at the time. But then in other areas, so a mix of urban, township, etc. And we had to buy them digital cameras. Nobody had a cell phone with a camera in those days. So our major capex investment was in buying these little Sony cameras. So
they could capture and document culture.
Yeah, so they documented culture, what was cool. They used to go, at the time, like now, brands run lots of events. So we would send these guys to these events undercover, taking pictures. We got kicked out of a few venues because you weren't supposed to be taking pictures. And we worked for a lot of the typical youth brands. So the Levi's, the Adidas, the Red Bulls, etc. We also worked for some of the liquor companies, and we can debate the sort of the ethics of that. But it was all around understanding, what is happening with young people right now. Because at the time, if you wanted to know what was happening with young people, you had to go out and do a survey or focus groups. That takes a couple of months to come back, whereas this was like real time and deeply insightful. And so, yeah, and we started in South Africa, and then literally within about 2 years, we thought, well, the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, massive youth populations, this could be relevant. So we, just because we had some contacts, we went to Russia first and set up Instant Grass in Russia, which is really cool. It's like taking urban spying back to the home of urban spying. and it was weird because I sort of led the setup of it, and we partnered with an amazing local Moscow agency. And there you are wandering around. I grew up reading John le Carré novels about Moscow spies and this and that. You're walking around Red Square, and right round the corner from Red Square now are Ferrari dealerships and all these luxury brands, because communism has opened up and the Russians were like kids in a toy shop. So we did amazing work in Russia. We then went to the Middle East and did work around there. We even, because one of our clients wanted us to go to Japan, we set up in Japan. And it was an amazing journey. And then social media started to arrive. Facebook started, 2006? And then people were able to overcome the real-time aspect. But what they weren't able to do was have the sort of the depth of insight that we had. So they could superficially see what young people were doing, but they didn't know why they were doing it.
Or understand it.
And Red Bull had always been our first client. And they kept coming to us and saying, look, how do we connect with urban Black youth? And we said, we'd been telling them for a while, look, if you want, what's an extreme sport? If Red Bull's into extreme sports, what's an extreme sport for young Black kids? And it's daily survival. It's the hustle. So why don't you support entrepreneurship? And anyway, it took a while, and eventually we got a brief from the Austrian headquarters, who, and this was now 2011, 2012, and it was the start of the sort of millennial generation where young people, it wasn't all about me, Gen X, Gen Y, it was all about me, my personal brand. And what was happening is it started to be about we, about community, about society. And so Red Bull Austria asked us to go out and explore this concept of social entrepreneurship, for young people out there hustling, but to try and help their community or solve a problem in their community. And they didn't know, nobody knew what social entrepreneurship was in those days.
Yeah.
These were just young people trying to do good and make a living out of it. And the more we explored that, and the more I started to feel this kind of vibration.
Okay.
By this stage, having worked in advertising for 10 years and having done market research with Instant Grass, it's like, just doing all this amazing work, connecting with all these young people, just so these brands can sell more product to them. But now all of a sudden it's like, how can we help Red Bull help these people? What are the things that they need? And it started to kind of, as I say, it's one of those things where people ask, when did you find your purpose? And it's so this sort
it's
of
when you felt the vibration,
that actually this is really interesting, because I've been an entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, for so long. And then you see these young people and you see the context that they're in, and you think, well, maybe I can help them here. And so we developed what became the Red Bull Amaphiko Academy.
Yeah.
And the day is the one moment when you sort of discover, Mark Twain has that lovely phrase, there are two important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I found out why at 1:30 on the 4th of April, 2014, which was when I did the sort of welcoming address to the first Amaphiko Academy in Soweto in Orlando West.
Sure.
And I'm getting goosebumps now, because it was like, okay, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. This is what I was born for. This is now what this is going to be. We had no idea whether it was going to work or not. And then luckily it was like an amazing initial 10 days, but obviously sort of follow on coaching and development program. But after those first 10 days, Red Bull were already saying, listen, we need to do this somewhere else as well.
It's so crazy to think about what the Red Bull Amaphiko program went on to do when you say, we were telling them that there was a different way to do this. And it took them time to get to a point where like, okay, we'll explore this. What do you think really showed them that there was value here?
I think, sure. Their brand is built around giving wings to people and ideas. Yeah. And whatever that means, wherever you are in the world, it might mean something very different. But I think what we gave it, there's one thing giving wings to people so they can drive motor cars quicker, or they can surf bigger waves, or they can BMX and skateboard, whatever. But giving people wings to discover exactly what they're capable of in a way that builds a livelihood for themselves, that solves a problem in their community, or at least starts to address a problem in their community. And I think, as I said, that their target market at the time was effectively millennials. And the millennials were telling them, we want to buy from brands that are actually doing good in the world. Yeah, we want to know the values of the companies we're buying. And obviously social media now and the growth of the internet was if you were a brand, you can't hide things anymore. People will find out whether you're genuine or not. And so this was the first time that Red Bull had really kind of overlaid a social message, a social mission onto their sort of business mission. And I think they just saw, like we did, you spend time with these young people. And, we, in typical Red Bull fashion, we flew in all of these amazing entrepreneurs and high performance experts in the belief that these experts would then sort of hand down their wisdom to these entrepreneurs. But actually the exchange was two ways. Yes, they had all the technical skills and the theories, but listening to the stories of these young entrepreneurs and the hardships and the resilience and the determination, so these global experts were sitting there with tears in their eyes, really understanding what it is to be human, to understand what, they were face to face with humanity in its purest form. And so it's something that we now, we'll come on to further, but we're a great believer that when you engage with communities, when you bring in supposed experts to help these community-based, that it has to be an exchange of equals, that everybody can learn something from everybody, that it's not, there's this psychological theory of transactional analysis, which says in every human interaction, there's a parent, there's an adult and a child. And too much of the doing good in the world is kind of parent to child. It's these philanthropists handing down to these needy communities. Whereas in fact, the most effective transaction is adult to adult, where one person, the funder or whatever, the organization has resources, but they also respect the skills and the dignity of the people in the communities, and the communities have got a sense of how that should be adopted. So I think it was just an awakening for Red Bull in general. And because a lot of their staff as well were young millennials, finally here was a project for Red Bull. As much as Red Bull is an amazing company to work for and you do lots of cool stuff, all of a sudden here was something a bit deeper and a bit more significant.
Yeah. So just speaking about what social entrepreneurship was, you're speaking about this movement of people starting to think differently about the way the world works, where it wasn't just about me and the individual, but I wanted to be part of a community and the community driving some meaningful result. What would you say, what is a social entrepreneur?
Yeah.
But also, what makes a good social entrepreneur?
Look, I think the definitions of a social entrepreneur is somebody who is trying to address a social issue in a sustainable way. And that sustainable way means understanding how to make that organization sustainable from a revenue point of view. It's not necessarily pure business principles, but it's got to be an organization that isn't just dependent on grant funding, on handouts. There's got to be some kind of embedded revenue stream in what they're doing so that they can do good in whatever sector they're working in, but do well in the sense of be sustainable and having sustainable impact. So there's lots of different definitions. And, on a practical level, you've got social enterprises that some are non-profit organizations, but they've still found a way to be sustainable. Some of them are for-profit organizations, or like we are at Further, which is a hybrid organization. We have a non-profit structure, we have a for-profit structure. And depending on the task or the partner, then we deploy either one. What makes a good social entrepreneur? I think, again, a strong sense of why you're doing this. And I remember there's one of the guys we got at the first Amaphiko Academy, Pat Pillay, who was one of the first social entrepreneurs, really, as we knew it in South Africa. And he said there are three kinds of people who do good in the world: those who do good to look good, those who do good to feel good, and those who do good to do good. And if we're honest, there's a little bit of all of those in all of us. Because helping other people gives you that oxytocin rush. It's the love drug. You want to help people, and that's a deep-seated human thing. There's always a little bit of vanity of kind of, I want to look good. This is part of who I am. But the fundamental driver has got to be the doing good to do good, because whatever situation is that you're trying to address is just not acceptable. And so I think a good sense of you're doing this for the right reasons. And there are lots of entrepreneurs or heropreneurs, as we call them, who are doing it purely for the first reason, to look good, the virtue signaling. I want to be the hero who goes and solves somebody else's problem. And our belief has always been that the people closest to the problem should be the people closest to the solutions, not only because they understand it a lot better and they understand all the complexities. These problems aren't one-dimensional, but because they live there, they should own it. And if anything is going to be sustainable, that solution has got to be owned by the community, not by somebody who just drops in occasionally.
Yeah, drops in and tries to solve everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And they know the answers. And
It's like, this is our solution. Now tell us what your problem is. So a deep sense of why. Then I think, I spoke earlier about what are the competencies of an entrepreneur, particularly in the context that we operate in. It's that tolerance for uncertainty. If you are not comfortable knowing whether you're going to make money at the end of the month, if you're not comfortable knowing exactly what your product is or what your service is or whatever, then you're not cut out to be an entrepreneur. So the world, and no matter how advanced or developed, how the business grows, that tolerance for uncertainty is always there. And so unless you're comfortable with gray, nothing is black and white. Unless you're comfortable with gray, then you're not going to be an entrepreneur. So I think it's being able to handle that uncertainty. All the usual stuff about resilience and adaptability and creativity, those are all key competencies. But unless you can handle uncertainty, then try and find something else to do.
Yeah, and these guys are, for me, I think social entrepreneurs are definitely my favorite types. There's definitely a lot, startups and small businesses and creative businesses even. But social entrepreneurs are so clear in why they want to do something, and the intention is, okay, I've found a problem in my community, and I think this problem could be solved with something that is, yes, a business, but we are focused on the doing good part of it. And I remember just like the early guys that were coming out of this program. I remember, I think her name was Tato.
Yes.
With the bag. So it was a backpack that has a solar panel. Correct, and a light.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow. For you to think about this and create it and try and build a business around it.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible thing. What does that journey look like for the entrepreneurs that you guys have worked with, where they identify the problem and then trying to structure it all the way into a organization that can actually be sustainable?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Tata's a great example. I mean, she came to the first Amaphiko Academy. She was 21 years old, and she'd had this idea for this recycled solar-powered backpack, and so everybody fell in love with the product. Yeah, but then and the problem it was solving numerous problems. It was like a triple whammy. It was getting plastic bags out of the environment. It was giving school kids something to carry their books in, but importantly, the solar powered aspect. So it was this little solar panel of a jar that you screw onto the top of the jar. So when they got home at night, they had a light to study by instead of having to use paraffin lamps or whatever. So it was just a beautiful idea. But then it was, well, how do we not make money out of it, but how do we get as many of these things out there as we can? And so finding that revenue model took a while, but ultimately it was a very simple one. It was a kind of 1-for-1 model. You remember Tom's shoes? Was it Tom's shoes? You know, where you buy one pair of shoes.
If you buy a pair of shoes, another pair gets donated.
Gets given, yeah. Which ended up having some unintended consequences. But for Tato, what she did, she went to big corporates. So, you know, when you go to a corporate conference, nowadays you get a notepad and a water bottle. In those days, you got a bag, like a tog bag or a tote bag or whatever. So she said, well, if you've got a conference, I think Standard Bank was one of her first clients, and you know they have these big banking conferences, like 400 people there. And she said, well, I'll make you your bags, but for every bag you buy from here, one bag gets given to a young kid in need at a school dropout. So they would do it, they'd identify a school, and then they'd do it school by school by school. So it was a 1-for-1. And she ended up, over the course of about 5 years, getting 10,000 school bags to schools across the country, all based on a 1-for-1 model. And that's what social enterprise is about. So there's an embedded business model. She wasn't asking for grants or handouts. So I think there's 3 components to it. There's the problem. And I mean, you know our mantra of stay married to the problem. You know, don't superficially understand the problem and then stay married to a solution. Stay married to the problem, come up with what that solution might look like. But the critical component is the third leg, which is how can we do this? How can we deliver that solution on a sustainable basis? So it's your revenue model. Who's going to pay us to do this? What are we going to sell? How are we going to avoid having to constantly go and ask somebody for a grant? Yeah, so those are the 3 components to it. And if you get that sorted, you can answer those 3 questions, then you're 90% of the way there.
You guys have and this is true since Amaphiko, you guys have had a very different way of treating or handling entrepreneurs from what the ecosystem typically does, right? Like you mentioned, accelerator programs. It's like go fast, you know, build as quickly as possible. Let's see how fast and big you can get.
Yeah.
Whereas you guys, I think you have a focus on the person.
Yeah.
You always say this amazing phrase. What was it?
Building stronger entrepreneurs who build stronger communities.
What does that mean?
Yeah, well, it's like, as you say, you know, these businesses usually start with a person or a couple of people. You know, it doesn't always have to be the single founder. But ultimately, you know, it's somebody in our world, in our context, it's somebody who experiences that problem on a daily basis, who feels sufficiently motivated to actually do something about it. So that journey of identifying the problem, developing the solution, developing the revenue model, it all sounds nice and easy and like we'll do step 1, step 2, step 3. But meanwhile, you've got to live. You've got to explain to like a lot of the entrepreneurs we've worked with come from those communities, but they had jobs. You know, they were working for banks in the city. So you've got to explain to your mother why you are now giving up this highly paid job in the city to go and start this venture that you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from. So those are human challenges. Yeah. And when you lie awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, wondering where the next food is going to come from, so many of the decisions you have to make and the challenges that you face as an entrepreneur are human ones. Yeah. It's about life situations. It's about relationships. And you ultimately are the engine. We talk of, in the sort of formal startup world, people talk about the horse and the jockey. The horse is the business, the jockey is the rider. But the reality of it is, it's more like a car and an engine. If a horse can run on its own, it doesn't necessarily run in the right direction. But a car with an engine, unless the engine is, and the entrepreneur is the engine, unless the engine is tuned, maintained, firing on all cylinders, the car won't move. And so, so much due diligence in this sort of formal VC world of startups. They interrogate your financials, your business statements, etc. But one of the things we explored with Red Bull, because of their obsession with high performance, is like, what does due diligence look like on a founder, on the human being? It's not just a question of interviewing the guy. We should be taking blood tests. We should be doing full physicals. We should be putting them through pretty intensive boot camps to check their levels of resilience, etc. And that's still something we're working towards. I mean, we do a lot of psychometric analysis on the individuals. We do a lot of in-depth discussion about what their challenges are, their contexts, etc. Because if you could easily get to a point using the usual approach that you had no idea that this entrepreneur either had a medical condition or had a family situation which was fundamentally going to impact their ability to perform. So unless you know the whole person, then that engine isn't going to fire. And we always say that, because there's so much focus in entrepreneurial and accelerator programs on product market fit, business model canvas, financial modeling, but unless the entrepreneur is operating to their full human potential, no amount of business planning, no amount of funding is going to solve the problem, because it's like pouring water into a leaking bucket. We want the bucket to be solid first before you start pouring in the other resources.
Yeah. And you guys sort of scaled this model, right?
Yeah.
Amaphiko was in South Africa, it was in Brazil, it was in Boston. And across the world, what were the things that you were seeing people trying to build with this social model?
Well, it's whilst the countries are different, the challenge is exactly the same. When we took, initially the first country we took it to was Brazil, and the challenges, the social structures, the social challenges in Brazil are so closely aligned to South Africa. Again, fundamentally racial initially, with a very sort of white-dominated society, Afro-Brazilians struggling in the same way that Black South Africans struggle. And again, it's the same dynamic. It's people from those communities trying to change something, even if it's only in their local community. They're not trying to scale this to every favela in Brazil. But those challenges that I spoke about, finding a way of doing this on a sustainable basis, are faced the same. When we went to America, Baltimore was the sort of epicenter of where we worked. And the parallels, in fact, there's one of the people we collaborated with a lot, famous photographer called Martha Cooper, who is, she's in her 70s or 80s now, and she documented the history of hip hop throughout the world and street art and graffiti. And she produced a book called Soweto, Soweto. And Soweto was southwest Baltimore. And it was a photographic coffee table book of images of Soweto counterposed with images of southwest Baltimore. And it was uncanny, because Baltimore is like a lot of American cities, again, it's divided. Across the railway tracks, you've got the white community and the black community. Even to the point where I think the center spread, there was a picture of a car in Soweto on bricks, this white, I think it was an old Toyota Cressida, the old Toyota Cressida.
Yeah.
A white car on bricks, but one of the passenger doors was painted green. That was the only paint they had, in a typical Soweto backyard. In Baltimore, there was a car on bricks and it was green and the door was painted white. And so, I guess what that says is the challenges are the same. You know, the social justice issues, the social economic issues are the same all over the world. And we found that, you know, we were in 15 countries eventually before the decision was taken to change.
Yeah.
And the challenges are the same. I mean, obviously in countries like, you know, Austria, Germany, you know, they're more uniform. The disparities, the Gini coefficient isn't as great. But really in the countries that matter, you know, if we're looking for a more equitable world where social entrepreneurs really need to play a role, then the challenges are pretty much the same.
Yeah. So I had the amazing honor of doing like some of the workshops with you guys. I worked with you guys so early actually, and working on Amaphiko. There was a really interesting workshop that I was specifically training, which is storytelling.
Yeah.
So there's storytelling and social media, but that storytelling element was so important.
Yeah.
How important does that become for entrepreneurs?
It's huge. And storytelling, often we confuse or use storytelling to sort of as a synonym for pitching or marketing communications. But storytelling for us is far more fundamental because it's about the story. There's two parts to it. There's the story and the telling. Yeah? And the story goes back to everything we've been talking about. It's why am I doing this? Yeah. And it's the story you tell. Yes, you might need to tell to investors, to funders, you might need to tell it to your community, but more importantly, often you got to tell it to your mother. You know, what's the story I'm telling my mother about why I'm doing this? What's the story I tell myself when I look in the mirror in the morning and I'm shit scared to go out and do this thing? So that story, the why, is the most important thing you can do. And we borrow unashamedly from Pixar, who are the best storytellers in the world. And every Pixar movie works to the same structure, whether it's Toy Story, Cars, Finding Nemo. It all starts with once upon a time. You know, once upon a time, this was the situation. And every day, this is what it looked like. Until one day, this person came along and started to try and do this. And because of that, this happened. Because of that, this happened. And because of that, this happened. Until finally, the cliffhanger. And then every day. And ever since then, what's the situation is. So with every entrepreneur who comes through our programs, we get them to write that story for themselves. And more often than not, they're still only at the once upon a time and every day stage because they haven't done it. But what that story structure allows them to do is it's basically their strategy. So story equals strategy. You know, what is my future story? If we do this, then this should happen. And then if we do this, this should happen until we get to a stage. And then maybe the people that we're trying to do this for, maybe their lives might be different. And it literally is, again, it's one of those sort of goosebump moments where entrepreneurs who've been struggling to articulate their story suddenly now have a framework. And it's not just their story, it's their strategy. The telling is easy. You know, anybody, you can be trained on pitch techniques and this and that. Pitching is massively overrated. Decisions aren't made on pitches. But the story and that narrative, and there's a lot, you know, there's the classic hero's journey story arc. There's the usual sort of protagonist, antagonist, cliffhanger thing. But story is far more than just the pitching and the marketing. It's essential to the overall enterprise.
Yeah. So you guys, you know, worked on Amaphiko for all those years and developed so many entrepreneurs. And I encourage anyone that's watching this to check out your guys' website. So the Further website, I think, is one of the best websites there are.
Cool.
Especially for how it champions the work that these entrepreneurs are doing. You guys have this culture of putting the entrepreneurs in the front, putting the entrepreneurs on stage. And you guys are doing the work in the back. Yeah. And, you know, from the Red Bull work, you then started Further and have now been working across South Africa's ecosystem with different partners. Yeah. Can you speak to some of that work?
Yeah, look, we've kept exactly the same model. You know, the two guiding principles: people closest to the problem, people should be the people closest to the solution, and the focus on the human being first. Those are non-negotiable. And luckily, we work with some partners who believe in that and believe in us as a result. So we launched just before COVID, and so we hustled. So we are entrepreneurs ourselves. But the first major partner who's been our longest standing partner and who we owe everything to is the SAB Foundation, who have been running the Social Innovation Awards for many years, for probably 12, 13 years now. And it's probably the preeminent social innovation award in the country. And the winners of those awards receive a grant, but they also receive a year's coaching and development with Further. And we're now in our 5th year of that. And every year we just get we find the most amazing people. We've done a lot of work with the Alan and Jill Gray philanthropy on the Alan Gray Makers program, which is not so much social entrepreneurs, but artisan entrepreneurs, plumbers, electricians. And ironically, if you think about all the conversation about AI at the moment, AI is going to put a lot of people out of work, but most of those people are going to be sitting in offices because it's lawyers, accountants, knowledge workers. That's the stuff that AI can replace, but AI can't put mortar on a brick and build a wall. It can't fix a leaking tap. So artisans are going to be infinitely more important. And so the same principle applies there. We've got the program is for young people who come out of TVET colleges with a NQF4 certificate in electrical work, but they have no idea how to be an entrepreneur and what it takes. So we've been lucky enough to work with them on building that entrepreneurial mindset before then other partners take over in terms of the business models. And then most recently, and you were there yesterday, we've just formed an amazing partnership with Nedbank, who are fully committed to the green economy. And I think that just those two words are essential, because green is nothing new, and everybody's wanting, for years and years have been wanting to do the right thing environmentally. But when you put the word economy next to green, that's when the game changes, because there is money to be made in doing things right. So the green economy is agriculture, water, energy, and waste, or at least how Nedbank define it. And it's funny, I grew up in Yorkshire, in a coal mining town in the north of England. And there's a phrase in Yorkshire, where there's muck, there's brass, which basically means where there's dirt, there's money. And now to see the businesses that are being built around waste collection, and we know in our communities, the waste situation is appalling, but there's money in that, and now people have there's a whole value chain being built around that. And we've, so anyway, to explain on the project, we've created this platform called the greenhouse. So like a greenhouse with plants, before a little seedling can be exposed to the elements, the wind and the rain outside, you keep it in a greenhouse to let it develop strong roots and become a little bit more resilient. So that's the plan here, that we've got 19 entrepreneurs all working in the green economy, most of whom haven't had any form of funding or support. A few of them have, but they're now at a stage where they need extra commitment and support. And so we're helping them now, nurturing them in this platform called the Greenhouse, where there's significant grant funding available to them, but there is, all of our whole person and business support. But importantly, Nedbank are really strong on tracking and measuring the impact of what happens. And that was part of why they came to us in the first place, or part of the journey we went on with them. It's how do we, they're investing a lot of money into this. How do they know that money is working? Everybody's familiar with ROI, return on investment.
Yeah, and I think most entrepreneurs and businesses will be thinking about, like, ROI is a simple thing, right? I understand I put in this much, I want to get this much out, and I set very specific measures as for me as a business or as an entrepreneur. And in very traditional business, I think there's very traditional measures. What happens in a social setting, right? How do you guys measure the impact of the funding, the programs, and the work that you guys are doing?
So there is in the world of social impact, there's an acronym called SROI.
Mm-hmm.
So we know ROI, return on investment. This is social return on investment. And it's quite a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to measure. But in developing this program with Nedbank, what it meant for us was we looked at, in all our previous programs, from Amaphiko days, SAB days, we looked at all the green economy entrepreneurs that we'd worked with and went back to where they were before they started in the program. And you look at 4 basic measures. So financial, which is their own, how much revenue were they making any profit, etc. Then economic, so their bigger contribution, are they paying taxes? Are they,
employing people?
Employing people, exactly. So employment, job creation, then social. So job creation sort of sits in the social side as well. So job creation, training, the degree to which they're impacting their local community, and then environmental. So, if it's water, like Murundani Mafumo, how many million liters of water is he producing? Or conversely, using aquaponic farming technologies, how much water are you saving? So it's not necessarily producing water, but by using aquaponics and hydroponics, you're rotating the water, so you're saving water. Same in energy. How much renewable energy are you generating? And how much fossil fuel generated energy are you saving? How many tons of waste are you keeping out of landfills? And agriculture, how many tons of food are you producing to feed people? So Nedbank have a team of data analysts who do the assessment of where they were on all those measures before and where they were after the program. And usually, for every rand you spend, if you can get a return of 2 to 1, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Nedbank aim for 3 to 1. So they want an SROI of 3 to 1. When they did the assessment of what we'd produced in the past, our SROI was 4.32.
Sure.
So that means that for every rand that was spent by our previous funders, there was a return of 4 rand 30, 4 rand 32. So, and it's not a precise science, but the irony in all of this is, in the world of social impact, there's far more rigor applied to the impact of money that is spent than in my old days in advertising. And there's a famous phrase from the founder of Unilever who said, I know I've wasted 50% of my money on advertising, but I don't know which 50%. There's no science. There probably is a bit now. I've been out of the game for long enough. But there's far more rigor applied to the world of social impact than there is applied to business. So that, in short, is, not everybody has the resources. Nedbank have a whole team of data scientists to work on this. But there's got to be some proof of impact, and we do a lot of work with our entrepreneurs, helping them build their own sort of monitoring and evaluation frameworks.
Yeah.
Because you have to, because you're going to be asking people for money at some stage, and they're going to want to know the same answers.
You spoke about proof of impact, which I think that's just a beautiful phrase. I actually think I might use that as the title for this podcast.
Okay.
It's an incredible project that you guys are working on. I can't wait to see, what happens with these 19 guys at the end of it. And we can actually look back and scientifically measure the actual impact of them as well. When you think about proof of impact for social entrepreneurs in general, what are the things that, if I go out into the world and I go, I found a problem.
Yeah.
I really care about this problem. I want to solve this problem. What should I be looking for that actually validates that this is the right thing to build?
Look, I think it goes back to the point I made about the people closest to the problem. We've got these neatly categorized SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 different goals. You've got clean water, you've got sanitation, you've got food security, you've got all these different things. But the reality is, in a South African context and in other similar countries, all of those problems are intertwined. Early childhood development can't be solved without solving food security, because the stunting that's created amongst early children in those early years by lack of proper nutrition affects everything. You can't fix people's health without fixing other things. So the intersection of all of those problems. So I think that the first thing, like I said, you've got to stay married to the problem. You've got to dig deep into exactly what this problem is. Because if you just take a superficial view of it and solve that, there might be unintended consequences of, something wrong. So understanding the problem is vital to it.
Mm.
The other sort of principle, and I sort of inherited it from my advertising days, is because advertising is full of egos. This was my idea. That was my idea. I won the lorry for that. I won the lorry for that. That a good idea doesn't care who had it. If it's a good idea. So you've got to be willing to open source your ideas and invite contributions into that ideas, particularly from the people who are going to be experiencing it in the communities. So parking the ego. It's not to say that in certain situations you want to protect, an IP technology or something just purely for sustainability reasons. But too often, you come across young entrepreneurs and they say, well, I'm not going to tell you my idea. Somebody might steal it. And unfortunately, in the world of social impact, that just doesn't work like that. So it's being open enough to invite people in to literally throw stones at your ideas and to contribute and make the idea better. And then it's about finding collaborators, and obviously once you've found how you're going to make that idea sustainable. But like we spoke about yesterday at the greenhouse launch, so many of these businesses, these green businesses, we've got one business in Richards Bay. It's a waste collection business. And it's almost the identical business to one of the other guys in Bloemfontein. And again, the challenges that we have in the country, no one organization can scale to the size of the problem. It's the difference between growth and scale. Growth is relative to your organization. Scale is relative to the size of the problem. So nobody's going to scale to the size of the problem. So isn't it better to have hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations collaborating with similar ideas or sharing ideas to get to the size of the problem? So whether it be through franchising, through partnership agreements, micro-franchising, whatever, that's how we're going to solve the problems. There's no one organization that can scale to the size of the problem. So, and again, human nature is we're very proud and quite protective of our ideas. And it's very easy to say, be open to people throwing stones at your ideas. It's like, fuck you, this is a good idea. But if you're really married to the problem, and this other person,
then your ego doesn't matter.
Then exactly, it's not about you. It's not about you. And
sure. Oh no, please go ahead.
No. And we come across lots of, again, it's human nature. People who are wedded, who are fixated on their solution, and it's the converse. It's the flip side of focus and determination is stubbornness. This is the way I've planned it. Don't you tell me how to do it differently. This is the way I've planned it. And that's important in that it helps you push through certain situations. But ultimately, it can be a bit of a kind of a handbrake, because if you're not open to getting input and you're not open to changing the direction of the idea, then you're never really going to solve the problem.
Yeah. You guys speak about the whole being and taking care of the whole person in order for that person to be able to build a business or affect their community. If I'm someone, you guys are working on the greenhouse right now. And if I wanted to be able to learn some of these techniques about how to take care of myself as an entrepreneur, be better so that my business can be better, are there things that you can, give out or share for someone who is on this journey and is going through a difficult time, or maybe it's a good time, but you want to preempt the change or the challenges that are coming, in the methods that you guys use?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are a lot of basic things, and there's lots of well-being podcasts and content out there about trying to sleep well, eat well, exercise, all those, and those are the basic building blocks to get the physiology of your engine working, so that you've got the right levels of kind of all the hormones and things that you need. But what the trainable things that we work on is all around overcoming self-limiting beliefs, because the things that hold entrepreneurs back more often than not, everybody says, I can't find the funding. It's more the underlying belief is I'm not worthy of getting funding. So it's overcoming those limiting beliefs. So we do a lot of work on trying to get people to reframe what they're capable of and to realize that they're capable of far more than they are. We did that little breathing exercise yesterday, which is basically you have a choice in life. Any situation that confronts you, you either see it as a threat or a challenge. And a threat, usually we make quick assumptions, very sort of viscerally based assumptions, like there's a lion charging at me. The assumption is he's going to eat me, and therefore I react. So with threats, we react. If we can reframe the threat as a challenge, as soon as you see it as a challenge, it gives you a certain degree of agency to say, okay, how am I going to do this? So you don't make assumptions, you make assessments. So let me just take a step back, take a beat, pause, not suddenly react, but make an assessment and then choose to respond. Yeah, and so we get our entrepreneurs to put a piece of paper on their wall or whatever that says threat, assume, react versus challenge, assess, respond. And just the number of, it's a very simple framework, and the number of people who suddenly go, shit, I can do that now. If this thing that I've been battling with, I've felt a threat, and it's all mixed up in self-worth, self-confidence. But if you can flip that switch to a point where actually I'm in control, it's all about growth mindset. It's that the difference between a fixed mindset and growth mindset is a simple word, which is yet. Fixed mindset says, I can't do this. The growth mindset says, I can't do this yet, which automatically opens you up for development and growth. So there's just a few simple frameworks that we give our entrepreneurs, backed up with some of the best coaches, if not in the country, in the world, who are all entrepreneurs themselves, who understand the whole person concept because they've been through it themselves. So they're half life coach, half business coach. And I think that's the difference. People talk about mentorship. Mentorship is learning from somebody else's journey, whereas coaching is helping you learn from your own journey. So all of that, with some of those basics, as I say, around just the mental, emotional, physical well-being, that all sets you up to at least be operating to your full potential.
Yeah. What is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey?
Sure. That there is no end line, I think. When we started our ad agency, when we started Instant Grass, there was always that part of that cycle that I spoke about. It's like, we're going to build this thing and then we're going to exit it and make our millions. And you and everything is predicated on, we've got to build this business, we've got to build the revenue, we've got to build this and that, because one day we want to sell it. And that means you make some bad decisions along the way. Yeah. And look, conversely, it works. It's a good thing, and a lot of, the best people in the entrepreneurial ecosystem say, if to make sure that you're investable, you need to start thinking about, what do I need to put in place if I ever want to exit this business? But with Bull Calvert Pace, with Instant Grass, we built good businesses, but I never really exited them well. And that's because there was a sort of, there was always this end line you were chasing. Whereas with Further now, it's like there is no end line. We just want this to keep going and going. And I'm obviously in the second half of my career, but this must live. This must go, must carry on and carry on. And there's no end line, because there's no limit to the number of young people that this can impact. And it's we've built the model, and it's a model that isn't based on holding on to our IP. I've in this last however long we've been talking, I've shared all our IP, so it's open there for everybody to use. It's just, we know how to combine it, we know how to do it. So yeah, it's just, and that gives you a peace of mind. I often use the analogy with entrepreneurs that the journey is like, It's like going down a river in white water, and you'll go through stretches of white water, and you paddle like shit to get through there in the belief that you're going to get to a nice, calm stretch of water. The reality is you're constantly in white water. That calm piece of river is never going to come. So the sooner you calm down and just go through your processes and go and do the work, then the calm settles and you're doing it. So it's always going to be white water for as long as I'm still able to do this. When they keep wheeling, they can wheel me into board meetings with my oxygen there, and I wave at them. But the work needs to happen, and it will always be white water. You never get to a point in any business where everything is calm and settled. And if it is, you're probably doing something wrong.
Sure. Really, really thank you for the work that you do. Not only for the impact that you've driven in the entrepreneurs that you work with, but even across the ecosystem, the people that you touch. Me personally, the impact that you've had on my life in really changing what entrepreneurship looked like, what it felt like, and what I understood it could do. I hope you keep driving the impact that you're driving, but also that the people who learn from you and are developed from the work that you're doing, they pay it forward so much more, and there's so much more impact that can be driven from this generation of like heroes. I like the word heroes for social entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for this conversation.
No, well, Mash, and I just likewise want to say thank you to you, because I think the role you play in the ecosystem of sharing stories, not my story, but making it accessible, making it relatable, making it real, and cutting through some of the bullshit terminology and mythology around what it is to be an entrepreneur. So I think the role you play in the ecosystem is massive. So thank you.
Thank you.